My name is Tony Gallipi, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of BitPay. So I assume many of you guys have heard of us, maybe seen us, but I'm going to talk a little bit more generically today about what is it going to take to get businesses to start adopting Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is great, you can trade it, you can send it to your friends, but it's really not usable unless you can spend it somewhere, right? That's the whole point. So that's how BitPay was founded, with that one mission. And whenever I give speeches, sometimes I go talk to technology groups, sometimes it's to corporate groups, but I'd like to start with this one slide and just to kind of break the ice a little bit. And if you've seen this, don't spoil it for the rest of the people, but I'd like to ask the audience, who can tell me what's wrong with this picture? Correct. That's not Ned. That is Homer Simpson. But he has Ned Flanders' credit card, and he's going to go shopping on the internet, and he's going to do a lot of damage. So what you start to realize when you take a step back and look at what we're doing today in e-commerce, credit cards were never designed for the internet. Credit cards were designed in the 1950s and 1960s as something that you present in person. And when you present them in person, there's a lot of ways to mitigate the fraud, and it's a relatively low-risk transaction because you're dealing with somebody face-to-face. When you try to use them over the internet, it's a situation called the card's not present. And there are huge risks involved in this. Number one, as a consumer, every time you fill out that whole long form with your name, your address, your zip code, the secret code on the back, you run the risk of identity theft, because that's all the same information that a thief would need to steal to pretend to be you. And so identity theft affects up to 10 million victims a year. And it's a problem because if you are a victim of identity theft and you think you know which store that happened at, you're probably not going to go shop there again. So it's going to affect your buying habits, even though it may not be the store's fault at all. It may have been somebody in the middle that was handling your card debt. So the way credit cards were designed, every time you use it, all of your account information is exposed on every single transaction. And it's a difficult problem to secure. The flip side of this, on the receiving side, this is the business. If a business takes a credit card and ships a piece of merchandise, if it turns out that card was stolen at the time, then the business becomes a victim of payment fraud. So they get a chargeback. They are now out the money because the credit card company takes it back away from them, and they've already shipped the merchandise, so it's a total loss. This is a big problem, actually. When you look at how much this costs businesses, LexisNexis does a study every year called the True Cost of Fraud. And they survey retailers. How much are you losing every year in payment fraud? And the number's high, $100 billion a year. This is almost 1% of our GDP, is payment fraud. So it's a huge problem. Credit cards have problems of security breaches. Again, by design, your account numbers are always exposed. And anybody that stores your credit card so they can bill you again, well, they've got to protect that. And so it seems like, every couple of months we hear a story, right? Sony PlayStation got hacked and 750,000 people's credit card numbers got out. Around this time last year, Global Payments, a payment processor, they leaked out 1.5 million credit card numbers. This is a problem. And the one that everybody is a little bit concerned about but nobody wants to talk about is Apple. Who here has an Apple iTunes account? Raise your hand. Almost everybody. Okay. Apple iTunes has 400 million credit card numbers stored on file. Can you imagine just the absolute disaster that would be? Can you imagine the cost that Apple has to go through to protect that and secure it, not only from hackers, but from their own employees? 400 million people. So this is a real problem, and it just goes back to the way that credit cards were designed. When you try to use them across international borders, they don't really work well that either, right? The ability to authenticate somebody over the internet, in a foreign country is a heck of a lot worse than trying to authenticate somebody over the internet in your same country. So credit cards have high fees. The whole process has been cobbled together over the last 40, 50 years. There's so many banks, and everybody has a little piece of the pie, and at the end of the day, the businesses are paying a lot of money to process a transaction. So collecting a payment should not be as painful of a process as it is today. So we obviously think that Bitcoin is the solution. Bitcoin was designed for the internet. And Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer payment network. So what are some of the advantages? Why would you want to use this? Well, number one, you can stop identity theft. That will never happen in a Bitcoin transaction. It can't happen, because in order to spend Bitcoins, you never have to give your name or your identity, so there's nothing for a thief to steal. So there's 10 million people a year that might like what we have. You can dramatically reduce fraud. If you're on the receiving end of a payment, a Bitcoin payment is irreversible. So once somebody pays you, that money is now yours and not theirs. And you can now ship your merchandise with confidence that you're not going to get the charge back in the dispute. So there's other types of fraud and theft that you have to worry about, but the problem of payment fraud, that is the big one that people are worried about, that goes away. PCI compliance is also not needed for Bitcoin, because again, you're not storing any cardholder data. You're not rebilling somebody, you're never pulling money from anybody's account. So you don't have to worry about being compliant with the payment card industry. One of the biggest benefits with Bitcoin that we're starting to see is that companies can now monetize emerging markets. They can now sell their product or service into places where they couldn't sell before. And when you talk to companies, they have a website. Their website can reach customers in 200 countries. That's not a problem. UPS can deliver their product to 200 countries. That's not a problem. The problem is the payment. They can't take their money. And so when you look at payment services like PayPal and Visa and MasterCard, they block half the world. So half the world is not able to buy the goods and services if you're here trying to sell it. And so companies are starting to see Bitcoin as a way to monetize the emerging markets, where all the other payment networks are not working. Bitcoin is also a mobile phone play, and this is going to be a really crowded space, and I'm going to talk about this, like a whole slide on it in a minute. But there are two things that Bitcoin can do hands down better than any other payment network. Number one, they can do internet payments across international borders like a piece of cake. There is no other payment network that can do it as easily as Bitcoin can. In the mobile space, Bitcoin is also global. You can send money from your phone to somebody else's phone anywhere in the world, and it gets there instantly. And so this is really unique, and it opens the door to having a true global community of commerce. Businesses can now do business with other businesses or consumers anywhere in the world. Just like now with email, you can communicate with anybody in the world. With Skype, you can talk to anybody in the world. Now with Bitcoin, you can transact with anybody in the world. So the peer-to-peer payment network that Bitcoin is, it's not really that new when you start to look at the three technologies that it brings forward. And these are three technologies that we're using every day in our daily lives, and they're growing. Number one is the cloud. Right? Everything is moving to the cloud. Your data is moving to the cloud, your business and your software is all moving to the cloud. Well, Bitcoin is an accounting ledger in the cloud. Fundamentally, that's what it is. It has no physical presence. The blockchain is an accounting ledger in the cloud. Bitcoin also is mobile, right? Everything's going mobile nowadays. Every business wants to interact with their customers on their mobile device. Customers and consumers want to do a lot more on their mobile device. You basically have a computer in your pocket that can access the internet, and you can almost do anything you need on it. The last thing is open source. Open source software is rapidly growing. Companies are not afraid to use open source software in what they're building. A lot of companies are encouraging their employees to build open source software, stuff that can benefit the community, stuff that can be released and other people can innovate and build on top of. So these are three, growing trends in the world today, and Bitcoin is all three, right? Bitcoin is in the cloud, Bitcoin is fully mobile, and Bitcoin is open source. So this is the only slide I really have about BitPay, what we're doing in this space. We try to make it easy to accept Bitcoin, and if companies wanted to take Bitcoin, they could do it themselves. Just like home improvement or construction, you can do that yourself. So, maybe you hire a crew and they put a telephone pole in the middle of your driveway. This is a bank somewhere in the Middle East that tried to install an ATM themselves. There's a guy in the Stiptos trying to use it, so that didn't work out too well.